Anyone can become rich if they're willing to burn all their bridges, use their people like tools, and ignore their family in the process.
They want everybody to like them. They want to be friends with everybody. At the end of the day, though, once they get there and not leading, not delivering the results, they're gone.
The leader's job is not to do all these things. The leader's job is to make sure all these things get done.
Every time somebody is criticized, it takes 6 times of encouragement to balance that out. And because of our psychology, we always remember the criticism more than we do the encouragement.
I could name after name after name. And we're talking multi-billion-dollar industry-defining organizations and leaders. Here's the most powerful thing about pouring into and building great people.
Hey everybody, Preston Poore. I hope you're doing well. Thanks for being here today to listen to another episode of P Cubed. And today we want to talk about just different leadership topics. And one of the things that really hit me was an article that I read out of Forbes magazine. And it talked about not the popularity of authoritarian type leadership styles, but the prevalence of it. And I want to talk about that because 2 things. One, I've encountered those types of leaders, that authoritative, autocratic, just tough bully sometimes, if you will, leadership style. And I've also been that leader too, to be quite frank with you. And so I want to talk about not how to lead that way, because that's not the way to lead, but I want to talk a little bit about the challenges that we have in that. Before I bring my guest in on this, I want to read a few things from this article that I just got out of Forbes magazine. And the title of the article is Aggressive Leadership Seems on the Rise, but How Effective Is It? So important to think. And so I'm going to take you back for a second. I want to read, because this is very foundational on it from a thought process. And I want you to know up front, I'm not a Sigmund Freud advocate, not at all. But I do think the thought process is interesting. Let me read this brief thing to you, and then we'll hit on a couple of points as we go along today. So this article says this: Sigmund Freud, in his exploration of a group psychology, suggests that in times of uncertainty, kind of like we are right now, right? Individuals tend to surrender their autonomy to powerful figures who appear to offer certainty and control. In his 1921 work, Group Psychology and the Analysis of the Ego, don't you love that title? Freud argued that people project an idealized version of strength onto leaders, unconsciously assigning them the role of protector or even parent. In essence, the more chaotic the world feels, the more we're inclined to follow someone who seems entirely sure of themselves, even if that uncertainty borders on delusion. And so I think that's a foundational quote to talk about, because I've been around so many different toxic leaders that are tough to talk about. And, you know, I just, before we got on the air, I was talking to our guest, Scott Wozniak. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Preston.
Yeah, glad to have you here. And we were chatting a little bit about this, and this really hits right in the wheelhouse of Scott, his life's purpose. And so, Scott, would you do me a favor? Just introduce yourself to the audience. Tell us what you do, why this is your life purpose, really, and then we'll go from there.
What I do is I lead a consulting group called Swaz Consulting, and we help people build great companies. How I got into this work is that I did a bunch of noble projects and worked for some really nice guys who were really bad leaders. They meant well, they had a good heart, good intention, and they were terrible leaders. And so I thought, okay, this approach doesn't work. So I swung to another group, and they were hard and driven and intense. And we also didn't get our results done. And it was this swing back and forth between 2 different types of bad leaders that really woke me up to, like, man, this leadership thing matters. It doesn't matter how cool your idea is, how grand your vision is, or even in some cases, how big your heart is to help people and make a difference. If you don't figure out how to lead well, nothing gets off the ground. In fact, it's not just a lack of things. It creates a lot of pain, frustration, and difficulty for the people involved. That led me to start studying leadership. And so I started reading all the books I could and go to conferences. I even got a leadership coach to work with me in a mentor processing. And at some point, as it was all coming together, I got real frustrated, and I kind of shook my fist at God one day. It's not right. The world's held back for bad leaders. And why isn't somebody helping these people? And I felt like God just started elbowing me, like, somebody, if only somebody cared enough. It really became my calling, is to say, hey, how do I come alongside these leaders and help them actually get their vision accomplished? Give them the tools, the tactics, the process. Well, I had a lot more learning to do. So I went back to school, got a master's in business, started my second year working with one of my business professors asked me to start doing some projects on the side with him with some of their clients. So started doing some coaching, consulting. And then when I graduated, that consulting group hired me full time. And then the founder of that consulting group retired and asked me to take over. And so I'd gone out to Virginia Beach for that and was living in Virginia Beach. I met my wife there. We were having a blast, right? Well, I came back to Atlanta where we're based here. And my high school buddies include a guy named Andrew Cathy. Andrew and I played 3 sports together and rode dirt bikes and good buddy. But back then I was not thinking anything would happen other than we'd be good friends. And it turns out Andrew's the grandson of a guy named Truett Cathy, who, you're local, Preston, this little local
Yes.
joint we've got out here. It's called Chick-fil-A. So I don't know if any of you guys have heard of them. 30 years ago, I graduated high school and I was like, hey, good luck with your little mall restaurant. Hope you make
The
it.
chicken samples, right? As you go
Yeah,
through the mall
yeah.
and all.
They made it, Preston. They pulled through. They did
Very
22
well.
billion in sales last year in 2024. They're doing all right. So I don't know, about 17 years ago, right? I'm this consultant. I'm back in Atlanta visiting my family and friends. And the Chick-fil-A guys are like, wait a minute, what are you doing? Maybe you should come help us. So I ended up with this crazy cool job with them where because I was like, I'm not a restaurant guy. What do you want? Now I know a bunch about restaurants, but back then, and they said, no, we have restaurant guys. We don't need that. We want someone to help us build the company and pour into us. So here's what my job ended up being, a really unique position. 50% of my time, I traveled the world, went inside the great companies and just learned. We would come up with strategic plans and say, hey, what do we need to improve? And I'd pick 1 or 2 zones and I'd just go to the best companies in the world at those things and say, how do you do it? The other half of the job was come back, take all the stuff I'm learning and turn it into some sort of company upgrade. But so this crazy journey was like starting with broken leadership and then ultimately ending with literally the best leaders in the world. And this juxtaposition has been really fascinating to say, man, what does it actually take? And across dozens of industries now, seeing the things that are the same versus there's some industry specific stuff, but there's a lot of things that I was like, oh, that works everywhere. That one's not about an industry or a size even. There are some fundamentals on how you succeed. That's what we do now. We help people build those fundamentals. We call them this engine. Customer experience engine is kind of the core engine we talk people through is what are the systems that create raving fans? It's not luck, it's not magic, it's a system. But all that to say, like along the way, I started doing life planning and purpose. And as you can hear, a lot of left turns in my life. Like, that's not the plan. What's going on? What am I doing? And looking for the through line, because the actual job, who I worked for and what I did has changed pretty dramatically over the years. But what I've discovered is along the way, man, there's this through line through it to learn myself and then show others what does it take to actually get to the top levels, world-class impact. And for me, that's more than just raw money. Like, how do I actually impact the world? But I also say one of the measures and methods to get that kind of impact is to build a business engine that impacts a lot more people. If you can impact 1 billion people and add value to their life, you're going to make a good pile of money off of that. And so it's not the point, but it is an interesting measure. And so, yeah, you want to make a lot of money, you want to do a lot of impact. I've found those two are the same thing. And unfortunately, man, I totally agree with the article in one way and concerned about it in another way. It is just becoming more and more prevalent these days as the world got more chaos and people got more uncertain. I mean, you got guys like Elon Musk, who in many ways people keep talking about him as the new Steve Jobs, right? And if you look at both these guys' lives, I've read their biographies, I've talked to people that work closely with them, I've studied their careers. I've been following these guys really closely for a long time. I think they're terrible leaders who who got good results in spite of their leadership. I think if they would have had good leadership skills, like what else could they have done? They're doing it and then they're like shooting themselves in the foot while they're doing it. And that is not the popular image. The idea nowadays is like, well, look, the guy made $1 billion, so we should do everything exactly like him. And I'm like, oh man. So literally some of my life purpose statement is to be an alternative, to show the world an alternative that you can change the world and have an epic impact without having to. In fact, I just posted about this last week on LinkedIn. My opening line was, Anyone can become rich if they're willing to burn all their bridges, use their people like tools, and ignore their family in the process.
Yes, I would agree.
Like, yeah, sure. You want to
Mhm.
burn it all down and hyper focus. And I'm not going to name these names because I don't want to embarrass anybody. I've been the personal coach to multiple billionaires, more than a dozen. Big famous names a lot of people would know. I've been in the room, I've listened to their process, I've gotten to know their families. Can I tell you the majority of these people have deep life regret? They are sad. It's their greatest pain, um, because their family, as one of them said, like I have kids, they never want to see me. I have to pay my children to show up, and then they won't treat me well when they do.
And so, first question I would have for you is if you're in the elevator with me and we're going up 100 floors. I was just in Manhattan this weekend, so let's pretend we're going up a big building. Tell me what you think the attributes of great leadership are, because you've done all this study, that you've seen the contrast between great and not so great. If you were giving me a quick 30-second speech on effective leadership, what would you tell them?
The number one thing that good leaders do is leaders create clarity.
Mm,
Everything, and that's number one in priority, but also in sequence. Everything assumes that you have created clarity. Now, clarity on what? Well, what's the big picture? Why are we doing this? Why should we even care? What's the outcome we're after? The goals? What are the major, finish lines we're chasing and all this pursue there? The methods? What's out of bounds? What's inbounds? What room do I have to play versus what do I have to come back and ask permission for? Clarity. Who does what? Where's your lane? Where's my lane? What should we collaborate on? Who's our customer? Who do we actually want to serve? Versus, like, the immature leader, we serve everybody. The vision, well, we're just making money. Money to what end, right? Money is the best metaphor I have for money and vision and purposes. Money's like fuel on a road trip. You really need enough of it to successfully do a road trip. But the point of road trips is not to go around filling up on gas stations, right? Like, they are the means to the end. Where are we headed? Let's get a lot of fuel so that we can get there. But why? Where? And clarity requires good internal work yourself. Like, you have to get clear if you're going to help them get clear. Clarity requires discipline to make tough choices. Clarity is more about saying no than it is about saying yes. You have to say no to a lot of things to get really focused. And then clarity is a lot about the discipline of repeatedly and in creative ways saying it again in a different way, in a new way, like again and again with your team. You don't say it once, check the box, and move on. Clarity is a lot of work. And I can't tell you how many times leaders skip this section, say stuff vague, make their people guess. When their people guess, the leader gets mad and slaps them down for it.
So can I ask real quick though? Don't you think Stephen Jobs was pretty clear with his folks? Because you just said he wasn't the best leader in the world, maybe, and that. But it seems to me there was some very clear vision and what Apple had in that.
This is, in his case, one of the things he did well, sort of. Jobs was really good at macro clarity. Jobs was actually pretty bad at micro clarity with his team. So you can't do none of this and succeed. Like, he had to have some of this in place or he would utterly fail, right? No, Jobs was really good at macro clarity. For example, when he came back to Apple, by the way, his first round, he didn't do even macro clarity well.
Okay.
They kicked him out. They
Yep.
probably should have. When he came back, he had grown a lot as a leader, had some hard lessons, matured. He didn't get fully great on some of this level, but one of the things he figured out was macro clarity. They had tons of products, and he did this moment where he put all the products down and they did this, bring them to me again and again, all day long, people bringing the product and pitching why. And he ended up taking a whiteboard and drawing a vertical line and a horizontal line. And he said, we're going to go professional and we're going to go consumer. We're going to go the cheap option and the expensive option. That's it. 4 products. And they laid them out and they cut everything down to 4 products and said, we have to get really good at these 4 products. He said they cut a lot of really good products in order to focus on the best. That part he was brilliant at.
Yeah.
Here's where the micro clarity fail was. He'd get on the product team and then he didn't build the tech. He wasn't a coder. He wasn't a hardware guy. He had a grand vision and he would talk about it in these esoteric terms. And then the team would make it and then they would review it to him. and then he would throw up all over it, or he would say, it's the best thing that's ever been. There was no middle ground. He didn't know how to
Right.
give pinpointed nuance feedback. It was
Yeah.
like, that's insanely great. That's the
Yeah.
quote he would use. Or it's the effing worst thing I've effing ever seen in my effing life.
Yeah.
I can't believe you have the audacity to. By the way, the next day that person would come in and be like, "You're the best employee that ever was," and I can't believe like there was no middle ground. He either loved it and you were a genius, or he hated it and you should be ashamed to be alive. And the team lived in this fearful uncertainty of like, what do I do? And a lot of people ended up quitting. The people who stayed around are the people who learned to filter that out for themselves. But he didn't provide clarity on the day-to-day tasks. He made them go figure it out. And then he would react. He couldn't give them the advance notice. And so there were some really bright, smart people. And some of the companies that spun off and created Silicon Valley were Steve Jobs kickouts, that they were very good at what they do, but they couldn't handle his communication style because he didn't know how to tell them the tactics on the ground. Did do macro clarity. I don't think he did micro clarity well.
I think it can go both ways. You can have somebody that's really good at the micro clarity that understands what happens in the trenches, but they can't think from a vision, mission, strategy perspective, and then vice versa, right? And so it's hard to be a general manager across all. It's interesting. I'm working with an organization right now where we've got a fantastic leader, but he's admittedly come to us and said, "Hey, I'm really good at the macro stuff. Help me with the micro stuff." And saying that help me, right? Because I'm going to lean on the people around me, put good people around me to lead me in that direction, so we're successful together. So I think that will be very helpful.
Oh, 100%. In fact, let me say this: where all the stuff we're going to talk about, the leader's job is not to do all these things. The leader's job is to make sure all these things get done. And so some of that is knowing, what am I naturally good at? And then, well, if I'm either going to you got to get good enough that you don't actively cause problems in that area, right? I'll give you an example. I'm actually not naturally good at micro clarity. I've learned a ton over the years about how to do that well. Back in the early days, when I was a young leader, I talked about nice guys who were bad leaders. If I'm going to be honest, I was one of those nice, bad leaders, right? I would cast a grand expiring vision, and then it'd be like, how are we going to do it? I don't know. We'll make it up as we go. And my team would get real frustrated because they wanted to make a budget and a plan and process. And I'm like, I don't know. So one of the things I've learned is I stopped wrecking that, because I would occasionally they would have a plan and in a process, and a week before launch, I would like dive bomb in and blow something up. I got a new idea and I know you had a plan, screw it up. And so I've learned to stop doing that. But I also learned to hire people who partner really well with me, that they love getting my grand vision and then they turn that into something tactical. And that partnership is awesome. Like Jobs maybe never was supposed to be that great at it. Maybe he should have just empowered and engaged someone to be a right hand to help him out.
Yep.
Famously, right hand man, people didn't stay with Jobs. He could not keep that relationship going because he would swoop in and grab it, even though he didn't tell him.
At Coke, Scott, I remember there was a leader there. He was out of Croatia, and he was over North America for a while. And I remember him standing up in front of the audience one day, and Coke had gone through all these reorgs and kind of had squeezed out, I think, some of the intellectual capital, if you will. And he made a very interesting statement one day. He said, we've kind of gotten rid of all the mad scientists around here.
Oh.
Right. And so I thought that was interesting, because you've got to have these people that think like Jobs or Elon Musk, or even people like my dad, who started a defense company years ago, right? They're just these thinkers that are way out there. The challenge for a lot of them is that they don't have the leadership skills. They don't have the communication skills. They've got these entrepreneurial and just amazing thoughts.
Yeah.
But how do you not beat people up around you to get what you're actually after? I wanted to go back real quick to this article, this thought. It says aggressive leadership seems on the rise, but how effective is it? Tell me a little bit about your thoughts, because you said you had some challenges with the article and those things, but really the essence of this is, and we'll put this in our show notes for people to read, is the idea is that because of today's society and where we are, that these leaders that appear confident, they're cocky, they're brash, they understand the politics in the organization, they work their way up that way. They're the ones that get into leadership, and then they beat the hell out of everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to throw names out there, but the Coca-Cola company, I was around one guy that was a VP, and he was very good at managing up, awful with his peers, and it's okay, got along where he needed to, and he didn't do anything for the people below him, right? And so he was a different person everywhere you saw him. But he had worked his way up in the organization. He was very emotional, depending on who he was around or he was political and all that. And it just never seemed right to me that who would tolerate his behavior. Because I've heard people, even after I've left the company 3 years now, I was talking to somebody that works for another organization that used to work with him and said, "Oh my gosh, this is one guy that I can't, that I remember about the way he treated me and the organization, things like that." You make an impact on people that way, don't you?
My challenge is not with the main thesis of that article. It entirely is like, I actually think I've been fighting this battle my whole career, hearing people want to go back to this. I think what you see is a shift in the news media cycle, who they want to talk about. I think this is a fundamental human challenge. And this will be the challenge is that I feel like if you want to look back about every 4 years, you can just keep looking back and they're like, it's a time of uncertainty and we're so afraid and oh no. And it's of course an unprecedented, unique time of uncertainty and fear and warfare. And pick your zone, right? Except we've been saying that since I was a child, like for the last 40, 50 years, it's been a time of unprecedented uncertainty. And I think what happens is every now and then a leader gets big success. And because they hit big success, people who want this style suddenly jump on the bandwagon and say, see, there's a guy, it's working. And here's the interesting thing. I could name you 50, 100 highly impactful, successful people who used good leadership to get there. For every one super successful person who's a jerk. They just don't make news because they're kind and faithful and they don't do anything offensive or ridiculous that sparks stuff. And so the social media environment rewards the controversial person right now. And so we're giving a lot of attention to the people who either inspire or outrage us or a little of both. And I could name after name after name. I'm talking multi-billion-dollar industry-defining organizations and leaders, but they're just not the kind of people that are newsworthy.
Yeah, if it bleeds, it reads, in other words, right? You've got to have the controversy out there. So,
Yes, yes. And so if you actually run the numbers, it's much more successful to do this with good leadership. You just don't. I mean, I've just finished reading the biography of Michael Dell and the
okay,
crazy stuff. And Michael Dell said, listen, I want to do this in a way that my kids still love me and want to be around me. And his
awesome.
kids today say, he's my best friend and the first person I call when I want to share news. And Michael Dell's done some crazy stuff. He started as a young, wild kid, built a bunch of stuff up at 19 years old. He started Dell. I mean, 22 years old, they was already a several $100 million a year company, and he founded the joint. I mean, wild stuff that we should be excited about. Bought the company back privately. Like it went public. He didn't think they were getting it, and it wasn't performing well. So he literally the largest ever private buyout of a public company, like 26, 28 billion. I can't remember the exact number. I mean, it's a wild story, but a guy who did it with a family that loved him and people that say, I want to work for him, and they spent their whole careers. Clarity. Well, you can create clarity and probably still be a jerk. But the second thing you do is that you make the people around you better at what they do. The leader's
Yes.
primary
So good.
job after clarity is not to do good work. The leader's job is to make others better at the work they do
Mhm.
because that multiplies. Here's the most powerful thing about pouring into and building great people. It's a compound interest game. This is I think, the sneaky temptation of the authoritarian jerk leader is, listen, if you give me 30 days to get a result done and nothing else matters, like literally the world's going to end, we're all going away, we don't have to hang out anymore, and I only have 30 days, then yeah, you're going to see faster results. If I shout, scream, pull out a whip, use fear, intimidation, and a lot of blunt force tactics, people will suddenly freak out and go. But if you need to sustain this over any length of time, it's not a debate anymore. We've done all the studies for all the years across all the cultures. The compound interest, the best metaphor is the old image of the doubling penny. You may have heard this, like, hey, if I give you $3 million today or a penny that doubles for a month, what should you pick,
Take the
right?
penny and run.
We know the penny. Here's the interesting thing though. On day 29, it's like 2.9 million and change. On day 29, you've gone through the whole month. The $3 million is still a better play. Like really. If we're in February when they offer you that deal, take the 3 million bucks, man. Now, on day 30, you blow way past that, right? You get to almost 6 million. And if you happen to be in a 31 day month, man, you blow crazy. You get 13 million
Hmm.
off of the 3 million.
Hmm.
This is the sneaky thing about compound interest. This is why we as humans miss it. Because if you're short-term thinking, the big hit all at once is actually better. But if you play the long game over time, here's what happens with a jerk leader who smashes and burns on his way. He keeps getting 20-day reinforcement cycles, so to speak. Like he gets immediate results and you're like, it's working. See, it's working. Look, it worked. But if you want to play the long game, then you blow those people out of the water. You just have to wait till day 30, all the way up to day 29 in our metaphorical month. You think I must have made the worst deal here because that's not how it plays. And so that's the problem with these guys. They don't get the compound interest of growing human beings because it seems like I'm pouring in and I'm pouring in and I'm pouring in and I'm doing all this stuff and I could have just shouted at them and made it happen. But if you get a team that stays with you for 10 years, 20 years, and the compound growth of a team that learns and grows together like that, these are the most powerful organizations in the world, the most impactful things.
Certainly. It reminds me a couple things. One is that I tell people all the time, Scott, results are table stakes, right? So you've got to get results. So whether you're the nice or you're authoritative, either side's got to deliver results. If you don't deliver results, either side are out. But then I've got this leadership philosophy. That's where this leans in. It says how is greater than what. How you do something is greater than what you do. And the how is in the leadership piece behind that. And so that's so important. I love this other idea, too, on the compounding effect. My dad told me a story a long time ago. He was out with a cousin of his in LaGrange, Georgia, fishing. And I think his name was Bo Taylor. And I think he was a famous Georgia football player anyway. They're out fishing and they're kids, and they would go from one part of the lake to another. And so Dad's in there with Taylor, or Bob Taylor, that's his name. And they'd go fishing. When the boat started moving, Bob would keep his fishing line in the water. My dad, as they'd go along, picked his up until they got to the next spot, and then he would put it in. And my dad didn't get a fish every time they did that. But Bob did. And my dad told me, he's a kid, and the lesson stuck with him forever. He said that he turned to Bob and said, "You're getting a fish every time. I'm not. What's the difference?" And Bob looked at him and said, "I keep my line in the water the whole time when we're moving." And my dad's moral of the story was, you've got to keep your line in the water. You got to stay in the game till the end because you're going to catch those fish. I think that ties into that 30-day compound thing, right? If you just go to that, you got to finish the play, if you will. As you go through that. So really good to share that. We talk about table stakes. I want to talk to the premise where we're kind of going with this too, is that you've got this contrast.
Yeah.
And I've run into these people too, Scott. They're so nice, right? They're so nice. They're nice people. But they don't deliver the results. And that's why I talk about that results are table stakes, because they're great people. Love them.
Yeah.
But man, they can't deliver the goods. Tell me about that leader. Why are they like that? What happens? They want everybody to like them. They want to be friends with everybody. At the end of the day, though, once they get there and not leading, not delivering the results, they're gone.
It comes down to a fundamental principle between, okay, what's the ultimate outcome? And I think you and I were talking about this before, and you said it really well. We want people to like us. Well, people liking us, being popular, is not necessarily the same thing as good leadership. Obviously, we don't want a pendulum swing. Like people hating us is also not good leadership. But I think clarity is a good way to make sense of this. One of my mentors taught me that clear is kind.
Mm.
Now, the difference between being nice and being kind, I mean, I'm splitting hairs. They kind of mean the same thing. But nice sometimes is I'm going to say what you want to hear. I'm going to say things that make you feel good in this moment. I'm going to say things that make you guys all think I'm fun and like me. But at the end of the day, it's actually not kind to you if you're having a problem and I'm telling you you're okay. I actually cared about you, really wanted you to succeed, live, and have a great life, then I wouldn't say, it's no big deal, let it go. Now, of course, the problem is we don't know any other way. We're like, okay, so then I have to point out every flaw that they ever had and constantly ride them. Like, no,
Mm-mm.
true kindness is finding out, well, what is it we're working on? What's the one or two things? And I get this from kind of my own life, personal growth, but also even my spiritual life. What I have found is God is really only pressing one or two things at a time on me. There's probably like 1,000 things I could and be working on, right? I've got issues, but graciously, He's like, I love you, and because I love you, let's start with this one thing. And I remember being a young man and be like, I get through some stuff and be like, now I have arrived and I have nothing left to. Well, actually, I gotta. Okay, now that we're done with that one, there is this other thing I could keep working on. And there's an infinite journey of possible growth. But part of the grace and freedom of good leadership is knowing, hey, let's pick a focus area, clarity. What are we working on? And then in that zone, man, let's talk about how you get better. Let's be honest about what's not working. This is one of the reasons why leaders don't show up well is they're afraid of making the other person feel bad. Their feelings is not good leadership. Maybe the best experience of this, I was going to say metaphor, but it's not a metaphor. It's actual leadership is parenting.
Mm.
The kinds of parents who tell their kid they've never done anything wrong and you're the best thing in the world and you don't have to work, you should just automatically be given all the prizes. I actually don't think those parents fully love their kids well. I'm not saying they don't love their kids. Everybody instinctively loves their kids at some level, but truly what I think is going on is that parent doesn't like seeing their kid feel bad. And if I could call out, let me call out myself because I did this. I didn't like having those negative conversations. It felt bad to me. It was awkward to me. When I didn't want to tell them the full story and hold them accountable and do the stuff that was the tough love, I said it was for their benefit, but if I can be honest, Preston, it's because I didn't want to do the unpleasant conversation. It was easier on me, not actually easier on them. Like a truly good parent would do to say, man, this is not going to be a fun conversation, but I need to hold you accountable. You can't treat your sister like that. You're great. Grades is a good example, right?
Right,
Hey,
right.
let the kid off the hook. Who cares about school? You matter more than a grade. Well, yeah, but if your kid fails out of high school and fails to get in any sort of tech program or college or whatever the next level is for them is, like, I don't care what the natural potential is of that child. Your child is going to struggle as an adult because you wouldn't hold them accountable. Now, the problem is a kid can't see with a child's perspective that how I do this high school class might actually change my options in life. It just feels like this class sucks, and the immediate impact is like, I blow off a class, I feel good. Parents have to say, you're missing something. This is a hard conversation, but it's a gift to your child for you to be willing to step into that uncomfortable moment and say, this is not right. You are capable of more than this, right? I'm not talking about the kid who legitimately maybe has a learning disability and struggling. I'm talking about me. This is my parents did this for me. Is like, Scott, we know your potential. We've seen you do this in years past. The fact you're getting a bad grade right now means you're just not doing the work. And my parents, it was like the grades was not a money game for us. It was like, you have to meet your potential. And if your potential is a B or C, then that's what you have to do. If it's an A, that's what you have to do. Like you don't get to coast, show up and learn the work ethic. So the rant
It's
here, Preston, is that kindness is often self-protective. It's not actually.
it is. I think that a lot of people don't want it to. It's the conflict avoidance,
Yes, yes.
right? And so they don't want to lean into the challenge. I can think of very specific stories where I've had to lean in but didn't want to. And I think a lot of that's part of managerial or actually leadership courage. On that, I remember having an associate. Real quick story that I hired as I needed to fill a role in the Northeast. They didn't necessarily have the skill set, but I was like, I can't hire anybody else. I can build them up. Ended up that they didn't have the skill set, and I couldn't build them up. And I finally had to get to the point where I had to start having conversations with that individual and giving that feedback. But here's the key, I think, that leaders need to have on this. And we talk so much about feedback. We really do. I was at a conference not too long ago, and this guy talked about how much they love to give feedback in the organization every 2 or 3, every day, every hour. They're hearing how they're doing. It's like, you know, if we keep beating people up with feedback and not encouraging them at the same time, we don't have that balance out. I've shared this on the show before, Scott. Maybe you know the statistics, but every time somebody is criticized, it takes 6 times of encouragement to balance that out. And because of our psychology, our fight or flight mentality, we always remember the criticism more than we do the encouragement. So that's why that. So if you're an authoritative leader that's always giving that feedback, you got to realize that you've got to balance that out with some positive recognition and encouragement, and that's how you can grow. If you're the nice leader, right, that's always giving 6 things of encouragement, never saying anything in terms of the feedback, the criticism, how you do that, then you've got some work to do there as well, right?
I would say, I love this. The metaphor I've used is like this kind of encouragement versus criticism balance. It's like having a relationship piggy bank. And so every time you encourage and connect, and it doesn't have to be just random words of encouragement like, boy, well, how cool your glasses look today, Preston. I mean, they do look pretty cool. But um, it could be just spending time with them and listening to them, as well as the attaboy, boy, didn't you do a good job on that project. But just you invest in that relationship and you put in, dollars into the piggy bank. Well, the piggy bank just sits there doing you no good until you spend that money. Every time you give critical feedback, this is where you're withdrawing from the piggy bank saying, hey, we really need you to work on this. You missed the bar on that. What can we really do here? Like, I got to give you some challenge. And to play with your metaphor, I like this. It would be like saying, I've not used this. I'm going to combine our two insights. It's like every time you do a critical piece, it costs 6 times as much, right? It's $6. And every time you do an encouragement, you're putting in $1. And if you're the critical leader and you start trying to do the criticism and there's no money in the piggy bank, you reach in, you say the words, guess what happens? They don't actually hear it and grow. I mean,
So
I've been
true.
there. The
Yeah.
guy who read me so hard, at some point the walls went up,
Hmm.
and you give him the polite face. You're like,
Hmm.
okay, boss, sure. And internally, you're like, whatever, you jerk. I'm not listening to you anyway. You're such a moron. And you don't actually receive that.
Yeah.
It's hard to process feedback.
Yeah.
It's only been the leaders I trust who had enough money in the piggy bank that they're like, Scott, I really need you to do this better.
Mhm.
I'd be like, dang it, I don't like that. But if it's coming from Preston, I think I might actually listen this time. Yeah, managing the cash flow, if you will, of your encouragement to your criticism, that's good leadership.
Yeah, and realizing that, right, as you go through with the awareness, I think that's so good. I learned through John Maxwell that there's 3 questions everybody's going to ask of a leader. It's one, do you care for me? Can I trust you? And can you help me? Those 3 questions. And so, as a leader, if we can answer those and be empathetic toward people at the same time, understanding if, and this is the other thing, Scott, I read this in the Wall Street Journal not long ago, but Gen Z, the way they want to receive criticism or feedback, typically people do the sandwich thing where they say, oh, you're doing here, this is great. Oh, you stink here. And then, oh, but you're doing great here. They flip that and they say, I'd rather hear criticism and feedback from my leader or manager where they believe in me, believe in my potential, and they tell me why they're telling me the feedback or criticism, right? Instead of just going right in and giving the point blank criticism. So I think that's helpful. But I want to lead, as we conclude or start to wind down our conversation, I thought this was a really good insight at the end of this article that we're focusing on today. And it's this idea is this, I'm going to read this, and it's about followers expecting more. It says this: we often get the leaders we want, the bold, the charismatic, the camera-ready figures who dazzle us with confidence, but not the ones that we need. Thoughtful, competent, accountable individuals who quietly build better systems. That was your word, systems, right? And stronger teams. Closing that gap requires more than changing how leaders act. It requires raising our collective, that's us as followers, our collective expectations and redefining what we celebrate, reward, and follow. So it's not just the job of the leader to figure out all these things. We have to be, as a follower, we need to understand what we expect. And if we're always looking for that charismatic, bold, autocratic leader that's going to get us through these times, that's very short term. But if you have somebody that's more collaborative, partner, that will lead vision, get into everything we talked today, that will be a more effective leader. And that's what we need to look for. Do you agree?
100%. I think some of why we go for this autocratic visionary is because it lets us off the hook. Man, Preston's going to figure it out because he's so smart and amazing. And so I don't have to carry any of the burden. I don't have to do any of the hard think work. I just get to, like, Preston will tell me what to do, and then it's okay. And I'm off the hook for dealing with the uncertainty or dealing with it. And so, yeah, one of my mentors, the former president of Chick-fil-A, he says the number one responsibility of every employee is to choose your boss well. And you're like, what do you mean choose I don't get to pick my boss. He's like, listen, unless you're in a slavery or communist type scenario,
Yes,
you literally get to pick your boss. You
you do.
don't have to be anywhere. You might have forces and pressure, and it might be a difficult choice, but we get to pick who to support. And he said, your number one career defining choice is which boss did you decide to support? And there's the easy way that the doubling penny works for the leader and the follower. Man, the short term win is I'm just going to trust this visionary guy because then I don't have to show up. The best leaders are going to call you out. And that requires a little bit. But here's what I would say, man, a collaborative group of people who actually willing to work together, they can far outperform the most talented individual. If you are willing to join a team and be a part of this process, let these guys shout and climb and do crazy ideas. Collaborative groups are how humanity has won for centuries, for millennia. It's how we're going to continue to win. And when you're afraid and when you're scared, go back to your group. Don't put all your hopes on one leader to solve everything for you.
That's great wisdom. Thank you for Scott. Let's do this. I'm going to close out with 3 quick questions, and these are just meant to be really pithy, quick answers from your perspective. I'm not sure if I'll have anything to weigh in on it, but I want to hear your perspective on 3 things. You ready?
Yeah, bring it.
All right. What's the most common mistake leaders make when trying to demonstrate courage?
Not listening. And it's ironic because you're like, wait, courage is the courage to step out and speak. I think there's a tremendous amount of courage in being willing to take feedback and this key and not defending yourself. If you want your people to receive feedback, you know what the number one thing you do? Go model it. Put yourself out there, take the feedback, and actually listen to your people. Let me just say this is a hard truth to some of your leaders. You're like, I don't want to stir up all these negative feelings about me. Hey, let me be blunt. You're the only one who doesn't know what your weaknesses are. Everyone on your team knows and talks about it. It's not doing you any good to be the only guy who doesn't know that you're struggling in a zone. You want to be courageous as a leader? Go listen. Like, sit there and receive it and say, thanks for the input. I'm going to go think about it. You don't have to agree with everything. But if you could just listen without arguing, that might be the most courageous thing you could do.
Yeah, that's a toughest thing I've been through with Co-Company twice in different circumstances. Similar team. Was going through 360 evaluations, right? And those can be ugly, but they resulted in great things. And so it depends on the heart of the leader and being willing to engage and listen to the feedback. That's really big. Hey, let's move to this next one. What's your top advice for millennials or Gen Z leaders striving to lead courageously? What's your top advice for them?
If you want to step up and lead and you're on the younger or earlier end of your career, trying to figure out how to show up, again, my number one piece of advice is learn how to ask great questions. Too often, the metaphor, the myth is like, oh man, you leader is the guy who takes over the room, the gal who jumps up and speaks first. I found the great question to get me in the door and get leaders to want a great conversation with me and think and demonstrate your intelligence more through your questions than any sort of statements you make. Ask great questions, become a great question asker, and it will accelerate you faster in terms of relationships, respect, and opportunity than anything else I know.
So good. I was recently coaching somebody and we were working through that. And I told them, why don't you just act like a journalist with your questions? You don't have to overthink this, but think about who, what, where, when, why, and how. Pretty simple questions, and you can form questions from all there. You don't have to come up with the most brilliant question. Best question always ask is why? Why do you think that? Or how do we do this? I don't know how, that kind of stuff. So that makes a big difference. Just the humility to go ahead and ask the question. And that will keep you from feeling like you have to be the smartest person in the room all the time. Hey, let's see. Last thing, Scott, you've probably gotten a lot of great leadership advice in your time in your career. What's one that you absolutely ignored and then you found out it was absolutely true?
The details, it's specific that the details matter, and tiny things like how early you are to a meeting and the clothing you wear. So I had people for years. I did not care about fashion. I'm not a natural fashionista. I didn't show up. Like, man, I was like, listen, it's shallow. People shouldn't care. You don't judge a book by its cover. And by the way, Preston, I still believe that it's shallow and you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. But in my 30s, I sat down with a mentor and I was like, okay, give me feedback. What can I do to be better? And he's like, are you real? You really want me to tell you? And I was like, yeah, we built some really good trust. He put a lot in the piggy bank, right? And I was like, okay. And he goes, well, you really need to work on your clothing, man. He goes, his dumb stuff. He goes, now he was mature. He's like, listen, it's petty. People shouldn't care about this, but I'm gonna be real with you. They really do care. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, your pants are too long. Your shirt is not sized correctly. Those pair of shoes clearly are where'd you get them? I was like, yeah, Walmart, $15. He's like, we can tell. He goes, now this is petty and dumb. And what happens is if they spend enough time with you, they get to know you and they love your ideas, Scott. But what you have created by not taking care of your clothing and showing up like a pro, and by this time, I'm working with CEOs, multi-billionaires doing this stuff. And I'm rolling up in there in like t-shirts and jeans and like, what? Deal with it. And he goes, they eventually come to love you. But if you really want influence, if that's really your goal, then you should probably remove this barrier that you have created because you haven't been willing to adjust your clothing to meet them where they are. And I was like, dang it. So listen, I'm not saying you earn respect by trying to dress fancy. That can actually backfire. But there is and I'm not saying conform and be exactly like everyone else, but make a choice. And my choice was, I don't want to bother because you shouldn't care. And it's like, well, that's not how humans work, dang it. There's a reason we have to tell everybody don't judge a book by its cover because we all want to judge a book by its cover. And so still, the most mature people don't care. And everyone else, I try to dress now in a way. So it's crazy deal what I actually did. I literally at that point had ignored all fashion rules, all pattern. I had jeans and t-shirts, jeans and a polo. That was my fancy version. And like, if you want to play, you got to do this well. So I took everything I owned. I had some suits and stuff, but I didn't pay attention. I loaded everything in my car with my wife, drove across town to one of my best buddies' houses he's kind of like always been the fashion forward, cool dude. And we laid everything out in his house and he put it in 3 piles. Like, you can wear this socially hanging out. You can wear this with professional clients. You should throw this stuff away was the last pile. Like, nobody wants to see that, Scott. Apparently my silk shirts from the 90s. Come on.
They were gone, right?
They were so cool, dude. Apparently they weren't cool anymore.
Not anymore, man. Scott, I appreciate that. I think it's important to understand a couple things in that. One is executive presence, right? And so there's just part of all that. I learned that in the bank when I was 21 years old in Birmingham, Alabama. I had to wear a suit every day and had to make sure that the shirt was lined up with the buttons all the way through the belt, all the way down through the zipper, that kind of stuff. It was that tight. But the other thing is knowing your audience. So if you're doing a keynote speech or you're going into a meeting and everybody's got a suit on, you walk in there in a t-shirt, you haven't done your work ahead of time, your homework.
Or vice versa. You go into, I work with construction companies and we'll sometimes go work with these supers. Now they're running $100 million projects. These are high capacity individuals and they're wearing steel-toed boots and a polo, right? And I show up in a 3-piece suit. I've also lost my audience.
Yeah, so good. Scott, you've been awesome today. Thank you. We've had a chance to explore this autocratic leadership style that's not popular, but prevalent now, and talked about the reason behind that. We talked about what nice leaders out there and really why they're doing what they're doing and then how to manage through that. So a lot of great conversation today. Hopefully our listeners will benefit and be inspired like I was today. Scott, how can people get in touch with you?
You can find out about me at scottwozniak.com. That's SCOTTWOZNIAK.com. I'm on Amazon for my books and LinkedIn and YouTube and all my companies, swozconsulting.com. That's SWOZ consulting.com. So we'll give you these links for you to share. But yeah, I'm out and about. But probably the best hub would be scottwozniak.com, and that'll point you to all my resources.
Really good. Hey, Scott, thank you. Hey, this is Preston Poore for PQ. Make sure you subscribe to this on YouTube, to the Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and make sure you follow me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook. Great talking to everybody today. Take care and talk soon.